Welcome to At a Crossroads with a Naked Podcaster, where we bear it all spiritually and emotionally. I'm your host, Jen Taylor. Each week on the podcast, I'll bring you an inspiring message to support you in designing and creating a vibrant, fulfilling life. Before we dive in, please visit the Facebook community in the links to ask questions that I can answer during this live podcast. At a Crossroads with a Naked Podcaster is for those of you who know that there is more to life and that our true, authentic souls are built for greatness. You are built with strength and love that is meant to shine through in times of conflict and in times of celebration. Welcome. I cannot wait to bear it all with you. In my business, I coach Christian women to step into who they are meant to be, inspired by their purpose and God-given gifts. Find the link in the description to join my private Facebook group. I can't wait to see you there. Let's get started.
Yay! Today I have Laura Staley on. Laura, how are you?
I'm wonderful. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Jen.
I'm so excited. Yeah, we were on almost a year ago, and I linked that first interview in the description. So people have all ways to contact you, the first interview. And on that one, we talked, it was your whole story. So let's actually jump in and then we can review some of that. You have two websites. One is Love Your Space, Love Your Life, and the other is Cherish Your World. So tell me about the two, what's the same, what's different, and everything involved.
Cherish Your World is focused on Feng Shui and that holistic transformation. So on that website, you'll get a lot of ideas and information. You can sign up for a newsletter there. Actually on both websites, you can sign up for the newsletter that I put out once a week. But that focuses on the wisdom, the 3,000-year-old wisdom of Feng Shui in very practical and applicable ways in your life. So the Bagua map, the 5 elements, and making the connection to your heart and those limiting beliefs in your process of how you relate to your physical space. So each room by room, there can be awarenesses of, wow, right, what is the purpose of the bedroom? What is the purpose of the living room? What is the purpose? Because sometimes people will have items or belongings in those spaces that aren't actually aligned with the purpose. And you can have a space that's multi-purpose, right? Often dining rooms for families are where the kids do their homework. Maybe they do crafting, but can you rearrange the space to be mealtime and kind of, put all those things away in cubbies and transition the space into an actual dining room where the family gathers and eats a meal together and enjoys each other's company. So the Cherish Your World website is focused on those ideas grounded in essential Feng Shui. That was my training in the Western School of Feng Shui. And I love being very practical about educating people about those ideas. Love Your Space, Love Your Life is focused on the decluttering, which you and I got talking about. And what I love about that site is let's go all out about the decluttering. I've come up with 6, there may be more types of clutter, kind of the emotional energies that are associated with them. There's information about, where your clutter is located. I lead workshops about decluttering and identifying where it is. Maybe it's everywhere. And then ideas to how to release it. Because sometimes when we have that aha of putting the two together, for instance, what if most of your clutter is in your love area, for instance? So the love area is from the Feng Shui, and so this is how the two websites talk to each other, right? So what if your clutter is in the love area and you really want a beautiful love relationship with yourself first and, with an intimate other? And wow, you have the aha moment that you've stuffed all of your unwanted belongings in the junk room that happens to be in the love area of your home. So that can be the way that the two websites talk to each other. But Love Your Space, Love Your Life is focused on decluttering and really living free and aligned with your deepest values and having those experiences in life that you actually want to have, and not having the belongings in your space block your full creative expression or your experience of being with people. I know people, there was a woman in a class that I taught, Jen, who she didn't even know this when she started the class. She had other objectives and goals in mind, but by the end, she was inviting people to her house, and she hadn't invited people to her home in years. And she was so excited, and family and friends were just so thrilled for her, because she had cleared, the shame had lifted, and she was no longer embarrassed to have people over to her home because she had done such brave decluttering work. So yeah, hope that answered your question about the two sites.
Absolutely it did, and I didn't know how they were connected, but I just love talking about this stuff. Because it made such a significant difference in my life, like hugely significant difference in my life, so much so that, you know, I blog about it and talk about it often. I've been asked to do it because it was a massive change. So I know you're seeing the same thing with people. Talk to me about all of the things peripherally, like you have blog, podcasts. Yeah. Let's talk about that stuff next.
So I'm a contributing writer and columnist with Biz Catalyst 360. So I have poetry and essays there, not directly on Feng Shui, but certainly on emotional health, personal discovery, self-awareness, and some on decluttering and Feng Shui. So I'll weave that in there. And my passion for nature often shows up in my poetry. I'm also a blogger for Sacred Stories. And on their website, I'm a columnist with the Owl publication, and that's through Sacred Stories. My column is called Right for Now. And again, I'm offering deep wisdom around holistic transformation, because I really feel passionate that it's not just your physical space, but it's your heart, it's your mind, it's those limiting beliefs that may be blocking your full heart expression and being in the world and being connected with people in really meaningful ways. So a lot of my writing is focused on that self-discovery. And as you said in your introduction, you know, about living that soul-led life, right? And not just kind of the cravings and the aversions of the ego personality, if you will. Yeah, so those are, I have videos at Cherish Your World on YouTube. They're also on Instagram, and those are about the decluttering. I have videos where I'm reading the chapters of the first book that I published. So videos are out there in our internet land, also available through Facebook, and then LinkedIn. So I have an author's page on Facebook. But yeah, there's a lot, as it turns out, as I'm answering your question, I realize there's a lot of ways that people could connect with me.
Yeah. Yeah, there usually are more than we realize. Yeah, there usually are.
It's like, wow. And I have been a guest on numerous podcasts. And some of those podcasts have focused on my writing and my personal essay and stories of healing and my own transformations and the wisdom I've gleaned along the way. And then some of it is specific to the Feng Shui decluttering conversation. And sometimes it's a whole mixture. So that would be another way. And again, those podcasts are listed on my LinkedIn profile for sure. I need to update that as I'm answering your question here.
That's fine. Sometimes I'm like, oh, you have a link on your website that's wrong. And, you know, I get people on and I'm like, hey, this didn't work. And there's a typo. So, I mean, sometimes it just takes somebody else prompting you to realize like, oh, I need to change some of that stuff. That's good. That's a good thing. Tell me about your books, because there's more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah, get them.
So there are 4 books, Jen. The first one came out of me in 2016. This is Let Go Courageously and Live with Love. It's available at Amazon. I self-published it. You can also get this one through my website. This one, I love this one, especially if you have a family and you're really looking at decluttering and ideas and wisdom that you can, real practical ideas. So there's essays in this as well as ideas at the end of each essay. And there's one whole chapter I actually devoted to some of the practices I had with my kids around their space and their bedrooms and those, as we were talking about, those sentimental items, right? That they get and they're like, oh gosh, I don't want to hurt, Johnny's feelings. He gave this to me, and what do I do with this, Mom? And those discussions that you can have. But that's in this book. The next one are 100 tips. It's Cherish Your World gift book of 100 tips to support your home and your life. And it's a lot of different ideas about decluttering. And what I hear from people is they love that they can just kind of turn to a page and read that tip for the day and maybe integrate it, maybe one a day. They can just set it down and, kind of open it up to whatever is there and say, oh gosh, that really makes a difference for me. So for emotional health, there's support here for that clearing of the heart, clearing of limiting beliefs, even in relationships. So the wisdom I've gleaned over my life shows up in this gift book. Mm-hmm. Then there's Live Inspired that came out last year, and it's essays with the wisdom I gleaned along my lifetime. There's some essays specific to decluttering, but this is really where I do self-discovery and offer the wisdom that I've learned from my own self-discovery and awakenings to, wow, okay, there's certain things in my life that are working really well, but then there are these other areas that, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so much unworthiness or not safe or whatever it was. And then really trying to connect the dots and awaken to that more fulfilling life. So this is a great book if you're in that place of wanting to awaken to your own discoveries, because there's just a lot of wisdom that I offer. It's vulnerable. I'm very candid, but it's filled with a lot of love. And there's some humor in here too. There's some essays that'll make you laugh. And there are people have told me they've laughed and cried reading this book. And then this one officially launches, Abundant Heart officially launches on Thursday. I'm so excited. This book has poetry, prose, and essay. And again, very much focused on that gracious walk through life. There's ideas about healing, loving, and living free. In all 5, so I have 5 sections. There's a section on reclaiming, and I'm very candid again about some things that happened, and I kind of pulled it out to happen in my life and the recovery and the reclaiming I did. Again, there's humor in this book and a lot of love. This really focuses on that need to be loving and loved in the world. And it's, in many ways, it's a love offering to the world right now that seems to be aching for so much love. So Abundant Heart is a beautiful gift if you want to gift it to somebody or get it for yourself. And I'm just so thrilled. And both Live Inspired and Abundant Heart are published through Sacred Stories Publishing. I'm just really honored to work with them.
And I know them. I haven't published with them, but I know them really well. And I think it's just amazing. And that's also where you have a guest blog.
Correct. That's
yeah.
right.
And that's a really, really incredible organization. So I love that. That's where we met. way back when.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yep, because they would have sent out the information about Live Inspired to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
want to talk. So I want to kind of overview our first conversation. You have a very unique experience because you grew up with a mom who had bipolar disorder.
Well, I would describe it as borderline personality disorder. Some
Okay.
people, yeah, just to clarify that,
Good.
it came in the DSM, I think, in the 80s, but it took me a long time to kind of have a rich understanding. There were 2 books that were incredibly meaningful to me in that discovery. Well, there's Walking on Eggshells, which is good, but there's one by Christine Lawson, Understanding the Borderline Mother, and then there's a subtitle, but then there's also a book by Kimberly Roth and Friedman. I'm not remembering, maybe it's Frida Friedman and Kimberly Roth. And again, it's surviving a parent of a borderline dynamic. And those 2 books were pivotal for me because finally somebody was speaking to the actual experience I had as a child, even though some of their recommendations weren't necessarily things that resonated completely with me. Because they're therapists and they hadn't lived it. So when you live it, it's like, whoa, it's a whole other thing. It's just a whole other thing. So the deep work to overcome that, but then layered with the dynamics of my family. So I was the scapegoat in the family. And but layered with that, as I went out into the world, Jen, and experienced sexual abuse outside of the home and children who bullied me. And it was just kind of like this. Oh, so I found haven in nature and with books. Thank goodness. And I did have a grandmother who absolutely unconditionally loved me, and my dad loved me as best as he could inside that dynamic. And yet, often he was a mouthpiece for my mother because he was very loyal to her. So anytime she was upset, I would be held accountable and asked to demanded that I give an apology and, that whole thing. And I'm a little kid, so it was just like this swirl of shame, blame, not good enough, traumas, well, and some physical, so personal, hard to talk about, right? Because it wasn't like I got punched in the gut. It was, more personal in that violation of my body, inside my household, and of course the sexual molestation that took place outside of the household. So it was a lot. It was a lot, and it persisted, deep into my adulthood, because of course when somebody is that challenged, kind of a tortured soul is what I've come to terms with about my mom. She had this incredible capacity, Jen, because that's part of the dynamic, to shapeshift. So I saw her be incredibly kind to other people. So I knew she had that capacity. She just didn't have that capacity with me. I'd show up in the room and it was like, it's like I brought out the worst in her, and I could not perfect myself enough to gain her approval, because the path, interestingly enough, there's a lot of paths that a child could take in that kind of container. The path that I happened to take, and maybe because of my dad, likely my grandmother, maybe some teacher, well, for sure some teachers along the way, right, who believed in me, who saw my sweetness, my goodness. I just thought, gosh, I'm just going to be the most kind, perfect, sweet being on the planet, right? And it became an impossible goal, because more than anything, I just wanted to be loved and accepted by my own mother. Who doesn't want that, right? And then you go out in the world, right, and you hear I call it a myth. I think it's a reality for some people, and I'm so happy for them, honestly. but the myth that every mother is this unconditionally loving mother who's skilled and patient and kind and nurturing, I didn't have any of that. It just, yes, I was fed and clothed, and I'm super grateful for that. But these dynamics were very, very, very intense, and I no longer sugarcoat it. So, but know that I saw these other aspects of my mother. She laughed, she told funny stories. She was a teacher, students loved her, people in the community loved her. So it was right. So then it really becomes like, oh my God, it really is me. It's really me. Because even my friends in high school would be like, oh, I love your mom. And I would be like, okay.
You want her? You can have her then. Here.
I know. And I think that's what's tough, because when somebody shows up mean everywhere, it's almost like the whole community sees that. I mean, somebody is bound to go, oh man, okay, that person seems to be just like chronically angry, right? But because she was so masterful at that shape shifting, I was just convinced, right, as a child, that it was me. It had to be me.
You're the common denominator.
And I so badly wanted to become that child that ran up at the fairgrounds, right, and gave her this big, huge hug, and she's hugging him right back. Now, she hugged me, but she said really mean things in my ear. So again, those perceptions, right, that the assumptions we might make about somebody out in public and how they're treating a child. And if you don't do the deeper dive, you might be fooled by an individual who is really deeply troubled. Yeah. So I hardly talked about it until it was in my 20s that things got finally I did start talking to a lot of people actually in my 20s. They're like, no, I don't want to hear another story about your mother. But I opened to that path of, oh gosh, I have to heal my life. I broke ties with my family of origin for a decade. There was a brief window of a detente where I did reconnect. Both my parents have passed. My dad passed in 2019. My mother passed in March of 2020, and I don't remember if I guess maybe we had our interview when she had already passed. So at this stage, a year and a half in the wake of my mother's passing, the deeper healing work and deeper forgiveness and compassion, and of course finding out things about what happened to you and wondering what happened to her, that created, and I have some inklings, but it's been more important to me to do the deep healing and take responsibility for my words and deeds going forward, and live a life aligned with my core values and from my soul, and absolutely trust that she's engaged in a process, hopefully in a big ball of love.
I understand completely what you're saying. When I wrote my book a few years ago, my dad had passed away. I wouldn't have cared if he hadn't, though.
Yeah.
Because I cut off contact just like you did. And like it would not have mattered to me at all. It did matter with my mom though, because my goal, my fear was that I'm going to write this book and it's going to hurt some people. It's going to do more overwhelmingly good, but also people, like her are going to feel hurt. And that did happen, but I was okay with it. I hit the point where getting the story out and sharing it and using that as part of my healing and being okay. Like, this is my story.
Right.
You can tell your story and I can look horrible in your story too. And that just, I guess for me, it was when my kids started having their own stories of trauma and came forward. And I thought, I can never tell them to really embrace their story of trauma and talk about it and get healing if I'm not living that same thing. And so I had done I've done the healing work, but I hadn't shared my story. And that was the thing for me. And a lot of people have no desire to share. That's not part of the healing journey. But for me, it was a huge part of my journey. And I wanted to be an example to my kids that you never have to be afraid of your story. And that was the final thing for me, where I was like, yeah, it might hurt some people's feelings, and I'm sorry. And that's not my intention. However, I'm writing it anyway. And it's been 5 years. It's totally worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and the truth is, in Live Inspired, I tell the story on myself of how I was struggling, though never diagnosed, but I would describe it as kind of persistent traumatic stress. I didn't call my kids awful names, but I would just have these explosions, you know, just where I was like a cartoon character, and I'm exploding. So I was willing to tell those stories on myself and own the ways that I behaved badly, right? And how I was trying to cope with my own unhealed traumas. So, you know, it does take so much courage, Jen, that you told those stories, and that you wanted to be an example for your kids. And I very much, like you, I wanted to break the cycle. I was hugely committed to not parenting the way I had been parented. And I began my work well before I had kids. And then you have kids.
Yep.
Like, whoa, you know, the invitation and opportunity to do the way deeper dive, you know, right, to get in my body and not have the rage shame cycle going on in front of my kids. Because my ex came up to me and was like, "You're scaring our kids. You're kind of scaring me." And I was like, they need to see anger. And then I was like, wait, only a coward behaves like a crazy person in front of their kids. So I finally dropped in and started the body work to unravel and untangle all of my past traumas. And we now know that, you know, it comes in multisensory, and we can pull it apart, you know, T1, you know, time, you know, the event, and then, you know, and break it, not to relive it, but to untangle it from the nervous system. And we even know that emotional suppression harms our health. I mean, there's so much information out there now too. And I would offer that unresolved trauma does not good things to one's psyche, one's health, one's soul even. And so even if you aren't like Jen, you and I were courageous and vulnerable enough to go ahead and tell the story, knowing that maybe some people would be hurt. But in my case, interestingly enough, I got an amazing letter of apology from my own sister. And we've since healed and reconciled, because I knew she was just mimicking my mom. I mean, she was a little kid too. So I had forgiven her a long time ago, but to get this apology and, you know, the deeper recognitions of some of the dynamics and the hard things that I had lived was a huge affirmation. She's the only person from my past who has come forward. No, that's not true. My brother did say we had different childhoods. He was split all good. So he just didn't see it, like he had blinders on. But I think he did get impacted. We all did in different ways, right? Right. So I don't think, I mean, maybe they got hurt. Maybe they're people in the family. Maybe, you know, people in the community, or, you know, if they read the book, they would get offended. I don't know. I think it was more important. But even if somebody chooses not to write about it and have it published or out there in the world like you and I have, I would still encourage people to break the silence, especially if there's been sexual abuse or things like that, because wow, the movement forward can't take place. So, you know, your pastor or minister or, you know, or a psychologist, or, you know, get those resources. And there's so much information now out there about being trauma informed and ways to heal trauma. There's an outstanding book by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry about what happened to you. And just asking that question, right, is a game changer, rather than what's wrong with you. It's like, what happened to you that you're behaving all wonky, right? Yeah. And even taking moments, if I have moments during my day where I'm a little off or whatever, I'll be like, oh, right. Instead of being hard on myself, I'll go, right, some things happened to me. Yeah, some things happened that I'm still uncoiling from, honestly.
I don't think you ever end that. It's a layers
No.
thing. So,
yeah.
but you can get rid of, because I'm an NLP practitioner, so the unraveling and the limiting beliefs, right? I love working with people about that, because you can get rid of some of those really big blocks. And yes, then other things kind of bubble up to the surface. You do hit a point, and I know that from my personal experience, that the things that bubble up are not the same as those overwhelming big things from the beginning. And so they kind of start, you filter them out, and you've done so much work that you can start to unravel them a lot on your own, and with the skills that you've developed. And it made such a big difference in me in my life. I wanted to turn around and do the same for other people. So yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's true. You can get past it. And that doesn't mean there are no triggers. Nothing ever comes up. You're healed. We waved a magic wand. There's a crystal ball. It's not like that. However, you can be a really thriving, healthy, functioning adult who recognizes that sometimes you have a trigger and takes a step back and goes, wait a minute, let's be curious about this and evaluate it. And you don't react and verbally vomit forward on your kids or other people. And when you hit that point, just like that, that's a beautiful place to be, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I'm really, really happy to say that I got there,
Yeah.
and I got to what exactly you're describing. And in so many ways, by lots and lots of measures, flourishing, as are you, right?
Yeah.
So it's absolutely, and I think that's what you and I are both doing in our different ways and similar ways, is letting people know it's possible. It's possible to come through. Yes, sometimes it felt like walking on glass, or crawling on glass, and yet so worth it. So worth it. So worth this level of flourishing that I have in my life. And like you said, to do the pause. I love that Viktor Frankl quote, right? Between stimulus and response, there's this space. And in that space, in that pause, I have a choice. And my choice reflects my growth and my freedom. I think, that's like the essence of the quote. I may not have it exactly. And I stuck that on my refrigerator, honestly. And it was so good to just remind myself that sometimes silence is awesome, right? Because what I learned is you cannot take those words, right? Whatever those words are that have gone out of your mouth, you can't just stuff them back in with the energy. Because sometimes it's not even the words that you've said, it's how you've said them. My kids and I, we laugh about this now, but I always knew I had a bad day, Jen, when the next day my son would be playing with his Matchbox cards. I just have this vivid memory until I really started doing my work and knew I had to clean up on aisle Laura, right? He'd be playing with his Matchbox cards and saying the F word, and I was like, oh yeah, I had a rough day yesterday, or this rough moment, right? And he would be so calm in his body, but I know he was also working out probably his own way of, oh my God, what happened yesterday? And a little kid, and I cannot process why my mom imploded like a cartoon character, and it was kind of scary, right? And I didn't want to scare my kids anymore, but I also didn't want my son saying that word in front of grandma, right? The other side of the family, because I had broken ties with mine, but sometimes it looks like that kind of feedback where you go, oh wow, I've got some work to do. I don't want my kids mimicking what they're swimming in. Yeah, I have deeper cleanup to do, and so happy that I have beautiful relationships with both my adult kids now, and a lot in part because I did such rigorous cleanup, like much like you have, and you find these modalities, and there are many out there that really do, help resolve the big hairy ones. And then when the little things bubble up, you have the tools in place to just kind of go, oh, that's what that is. And like you said, I love the curiosity. I love being curious about myself. And even sometimes hearing the thought that might go through, and I'll be like, wow, is that really true? And then I'll be like, no, it's
Yep.
not.
And what we touched also, I know last time we touched on the fact that you had a flood in your basement.
Oh,
My house was burglarized, and
God. Yeah.
and right, so basically like a fire. We've talked about fires and floods, and when you lose things
Yeah.
from a source that is out of your control.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter. I feel like it's like my burglary and your flood and someone else's fire. You feel the same way from losing your stuff when it wasn't your choice, basically just having that choice taken away from you. And that was a huge catalyst to your change. It wasn't a catalyst for me when it happened. When the burglary happened, I wanted to hang on more tightly to my stuff.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Which I think is huge. Although over time, when I started to let go of stuff, when we started to embrace minimalism, I realized that that had triggered me to hang on, because I grew up below poverty too, when we didn't have very much. So when you get stuff, right, you want to hang on to your stuff because when's it coming again? And you didn't have stuff when you were younger. And I didn't do that too much based on poverty, but I realized that that burglary triggered that same thing in me, like that. Oh my gosh, things can be taken, or I don't know if I can have them, and money is tight and I need to hang on. And you become a low-key hoarder. I don't know what happened with you, but I know that the flood was a huge catalyst to change for you.
It was, and in my situation, it freed me to let go. Because as it turned out, and I totally get what you described, by the way, Jen. Oh, yeah. I hear that right in my heart and soul. It's that, yeah, of course you would hold on, if you've been burglarized. But in the flood, I had the awakening to the fact that I lived with hand-me-downs that I loathed. So we lost a lot of things, in that finished basement flood. But it's also when I found out about this wisdom of Feng Shui, which was really exciting. And this idea that I had never heard before, that I could live with things that I loved. Wait, what? Right? Because I was like, it's stuff. And when I went back to the house after being away on this trip to see family, I saw hand-me-downs everywhere, jewelry, clothing. Oh my gosh, like who was I? And I actually loathed almost all of it. And with that one sentence of you can, like a permission slip, right? Which is often what I'm handing people, right? Is permission slips. I gave myself permission to begin to live with things that supported my life. So I let go of that much more. But interestingly enough, I didn't run out and like fill it all up. I was so thoughtful and even careful about what I brought in, because I really, really wanted it to be meaningful and in balance with, again, this deeper awakening to my own core values and my own voice and who I was and why I was here on the planet, et cetera, et cetera. So it became this huge beginning, another beginning, because I had other spiritual awakenings along the way, but this one was probably, for my adulthood, was pretty major. In that, wow, I discovered a career path. I discovered my voice, a passion that I could have for an entire lifetime, because it's such a rich body of ideas that can be applied in such practical ways. So I began clearing out, and it was so cute because my kids were little, and I remember waking up and here's my son, moving the dining room table. He's kind of like pushing it with his little legs, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm feng shuiing the dining room, Mom.
That's awesome.
Just think, yeah, but it was so much fun because I got happier. And to have that experience of, from going from a crunchy, stressed out, wanting to be loving mom, and certainly had lots of moments of being loving, even when the kids were little, even as I was, struggling with my own unresolved traumas. There were still beautiful moments of loving them and caring for them. But wow, this was just like, woohoo! A whole other person besides mom, it sort of got to enter into the room, and there's been no looking back. And who knew that I would then be a published author of 4 books and a columnist and, contributing writer, and, just all the things that then have flowed out of that moment of recognizing I have a voice besides the one that I thought I was supposed to have, which are all the scripts that were given by other people, right?
Because that we take on. And when you realize you don't have to take on.
Yeah. Yes. You go, oh, okay. I guess I'd be a good,
and put that one on you. Put that one on you.
Right. Well, and it was, and like with my parents, it felt like an ever-changing yardstick. I think there were moments that, okay, she's a mom, but isn't she going to do something with that PhD? Because I did earn a PhD. I did teach college students, right, before I became a full-time mom. And then I just walked away from academia 100%, and they're like, and all the judgment, and, and yet I bravely kept following my soul's calling. And that was a moment too, right? Going to tell my parents I'm going to be a Feng Shui consultant. And they're just like, yeah, you're not going to be a senator. You're not going to be an academic. Oh my God, what are we doing with you?
And that was back in 2004, correct? Yeah. I want to go back. There's so many things I want to talk about. Let's talk about a couple though. One is, regardless of how you come to the situation where you realize it's time to let go of stuff, there's a couple things that you said, because we're talking about physical belongings, because I went through this almost 7 years ago. I was shocked at, one, how much it affects other areas of your life, finances, your digital clutter, like what you'll tolerate in your email box and online. And I didn't even consider the fact that as I'm picking up my living room and I'm getting rid of stuff. And so there's that part. There's the overflow into other areas of your life. And there's the thing that you said, because you said you didn't realize that you could own things that made you happy. I did, but I recognized when I wasn't doing that. And I remember we had been downsizing for about 4 months. We were getting ready to move. And I said, we're not moving that living room furniture. Like, I don't want to pick it up and I don't want to move it. I'm going to list it on Facebook Marketplace and sell it, or Craigslist, or whatever I did. And Dane was like, really? Because it's like a great sturdy couch set. And I said, I hate this couch set. It was given to me. It's in great shape. It's really good. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Right. And even the hand-me-down thing didn't bother me.
Yeah. No.
I just don't like it. And he just went, well, then it's time to give it to somebody who does. So I think I also gave myself permission in a different way than you do, that you don't have to keep anything that doesn't make you, like, at this point, I would rather not have any furniture in my house than something that I don't like. So it really allows you to hone down. Well, then, like, if you don't like that couch, what couch do you like? Right. I don't even know what couch I do like. Like, at that point, I was like, I have no idea, but I know it's not that one.
Yeah.
And we couldn't spend the money at the time on a couch set.
Right.
And I still said, I'm not lifting this with you, putting it in a truck and lifting it again to bring it in a house. Like, I'm not going through that process. Moving makes it really easy. And it was easy to help my kids minimize every time that we moved. And we rented. So we've lived in 4 houses in the last 7 years, which is a lot. That wasn't the plan. However, the plus side is, if you don't want to pack it and carry it, it's time to reevaluate and let it go.
Here.
So I want to talk more about the happiness of letting go, and the happiness of keeping those, like Marie Kondo says, you pick it up. Does this pen make you happy?
Right.
And if it does, you're like, thank you, and you keep it. And if it doesn't, you say thank you and you let it go. Right. And I didn't even know anything about her when I started this, but there is something about only allowing things into your home that make you happy. So I want to talk about the happiness, and I want to talk about how it overflows into weird random parts of your life that you wouldn't expect. And I want to attach it to the pandemic because we've had some of the highest buying months, purchasing, like, because we're looking for that endorphin. We're like, buy it, buy it, buy it.
Yep. Oh, I know. Wow. The happiness thing. Well, what I would offer is that there are definitely some clarity moments that you have, like you're describing the couch where you just like, I don't like it. Somebody else will love it. And it really is an energy cleanse. By the way, I would offer that if somebody has an item in their home right now and they really can't, it's so functional that they can't let it go, bring in a belonging that you do love. Like, so if you have that couch that you're really not wild about, bring in a blanket that you do love. It balances that energy. And then begin saving for the couch that you really would love to have in your home. I would also say that it's often more nuanced than just a simple bifurcated choice. There are belongings in our spaces that have many layers of emotions and stories attached. You could have an object right now in your home of your best friend who, it was a gift from your best friend, right? And you love it, but your best friend has passed. Mm-hmm. And so what you have there is this, an intermingling of, oh my gosh, this reminds me of this best friend, but it also comes with this deep sadness and grief and love in, so do I keep it? So I like asking people the deeper story about a belonging, because it often isn't as simple as, oh yeah, it makes me really happy, or oh, I can't stand it. It's this mixture of all kinds of things, like that example that I just gave. And again, it's going to that deep place in your heart and saying, okay, how is, kind of like, how is this serving me? Is it serving me into the future? Is it supporting who I am right now? Could I take a picture of it? Let's say it's a huge belonging. I mean, not all the stories, right? I've had the woman who came up to me after one of these decluttering talks in tears and just, oh my God, she had these epiphanies, and she's like, oh gosh, I got the broken rocker. I'm never going to sit in it. I'm never going to get it repaired. It was made by my dad. My dad has since passed, but I've got, right? And you can just hear the layer of, the love, and and he made it, but it's broken, and, and I was like, oh my gosh, take pictures, as many pictures as you want of every member of the family. And then, cause she was identifying, she really, really needed to let go of this broken rocker that her dad had made. And it didn't mean anything about the love that she still could have for her dad and all the wonderful memories, right? The love stays, even if the belonging leaves the house. And yet each person has to go on their own individual journey. That's why I personally have such a hard time with the shows that, the team of people will just come in and take everything away. And it rips people off of their grieving process, their choice process. And I also know, and their agency, if you will, their sense of, wait, I have choice in the matter. Mm-hmm. I get to say whether this goes forward into my life or not. And I know that there are some situations where that just like has to happen for the health and well-being of the people who live there. Right? Because if you really have a hoarder situation, it's a layered situation. And often you need a whole pit crew of people involved in that kind of situation. And by the way, I'll just say this as an aside, I don't personally work with true hoarders. And I've worked with people whose houses have all kinds of clutter and junk room and junk drawer and all that kind of stuff. And we just engage in these lovely conversations about, what would their life look like without the clutter? What is it that you want deeply from your core values? What do you care? What do you really, really care about? Because I think even though there's been the buying and the endorphin, I'm hoping also during the pandemic, Jen, that people are also becoming very, very aware of what they really, really care about. As so many people have passed away for all kinds of reasons, not just from COVID-19, but oh gosh, I just heard about a mom friend who lost her 26-year-old son to his liver was so damaged by the chemo, he had leukemia, right? And that kind of grief, right? So all kinds of things are happening in people's lives. And I think there's, at the same time, there may be the endorphin thing. I think also people are going, wow, what do I really, really care about? And do I need one more package coming to my door, or do I maybe what I really, really am needing here is a hug, is time to hold the hand of a loved one and look in their eyes and say, I love you, I hear you, I care about you, I cherish you. Or to get on the phone with a loved one and tell them how much you care about them and appreciate them, and all the qualities and the gifts that those wonderful gifts, intangible gifts, maybe not just physical gifts that they've given you, but those intangible gifts, how they've modeled, courage for you, or how they modeled being curious, right? Or whatever that character quality in that person is, what have they gifted you? So I think that's happening at the same time that the clicking is going on. Yeah.
I agree. It takes time, and you don't know what. It's interesting too. You don't know what will trigger you.
Right.
I know in my experience, I had these 3 boxes. When you have a wedding dress and all your wedding stuff, and you get it archived into these, like, the boxes are just massive, right? And I had these 3 boxes where my wedding stuff had been archived to save for my kids. And I remember, and this is a past relationship. It's not the person that I'm with right now. I was divorced, and we hit that point where I was going to donate them, and I started to cry. And Dane said, we can take these, like, we can put them right back up on the shelf, and you can wait and be ready. So I'm very grateful that I had someone who gave me a lot of grace. But I'm like, it's not about getting rid of them. It's that they represent my failures, because I'm not married to this person anymore. So I just needed to process the fact that I had to let go of the feeling of failure. It wasn't because I thought maybe my kids were going to want it. They weren't going to want my 1990 wedding dress. Like,
right.
I was not concerned about that part.
Right.
But it was letting go of the feelings that I had failed somehow. And I was hanging on to these wedding dresses like as a reminder to myself that I had failed in that relationship, which isn't at all even the wording that should come into your vernacular. So it is, I love the fact that, like, you can feel happiness from things.
Yes.
And it is multi-layered, and you have to go through the emotional process to let go. Yeah. And you can keep stuff. We've talked about things in our house. We're getting ready. We're at the very end of renovating an RV, and we're getting ready to move into it full time, which is a pretty huge minimalism goal, right? And Dane said, well, we're getting a storage unit to put stuff in that I'm not willing to get rid of. And I said, look, if a fire blew through our home, I'm enough of a minimalist, and I've let go of enough that I know that I'd be okay without my great grandmother's desk.
Yeah.
Like, I have pictures of it. It is not my memory. It is a representation. I do happen to love the desk. So if a fire burns us down, I'm going to be sad, but I'll be totally okay that I lost my grandmother's desk. Unless that happens. And while I have the choice, I'm keeping the desk.
Yeah.
So it's going in a storage unit because it can't come into the RV. So that's where we either don't move into an RV, and because we need a bigger space to keep the couple things. There's like 3 things I will not get rid of. Yeah. Or we need to incorporate them into an RV, or, or our house burns down and I'll be like, well, that was gone. Like, what are you going to do? But you do hit the point where you realize that your attachment isn't through the item. Yes, it reminds you of that person. And I lost one of my sons when he was 23, and I have a vase from his apartment. There's nothing special about this vase. If you saw this vase, you'd be like, I could have picked it up like anywhere for probably $10. Yeah. What makes it special is that it's his. If I drop it and break it, I'm going to be sad, but my memory of him is not wrapped up in that vase. I'm just thankful that I have it.
Yeah.
And I think you really shift your mental attitude around what your stuff means. It does still mean that thing. It does still make you happy. However, without it, for some reason, you're absolutely fine. And that was a huge shift in letting things go. So I'm hoping that people through the pandemic and buying are realizing at some point that not only does that make you feel better to have that stuff, it's increasing your clutter, which is actually making you feel worse.
Right. Well, and clutter often comes with I'm not enough. It's very fear-based energy, honestly, Jen. And attached to, gosh, I'm not enough. So I need one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. And it's part of the, consumerist culture that we live. And it's so gone Kawaki. That's not a word, but it's really
it should be.
It's gone out of balance because, not to get into kind of but it's out of balance. And the core of Feng Shui is about living in harmony and balance with the natural world, right? With Mother Nature and with our things, because the accumulation eventually is going to block your experience of being alive. And I hear this time and time again from people. They are so stressed out by the clutter, right? They can hardly breathe. I just talked to a potential client who hopes to work with me in the spring. And, at any rate, I work confidentially, so maybe I won't reveal that. But I hear stories of how people want so much for their home to be a haven, but their home is a stress field. And you touched on that in your story, right?
Yep.
And we now know that stress, cortisol dumps in, it causes health issues. Stress just does all kinds of wonky things to our bodies, our psyches, our hearts, and our ability to move forward in life. And so again, I often ask people, what's different? What's different a year? And what are the important areas of your life? Is love important to you? Is creativity important to you? Is making a difference in people's lives important to you? And if you can't even open the drawer to get out to find your favorite pen to do the writing that you want to do, that's a stress moment in your day. If you can't find the keys to get in the car to drive to go get groceries, that's a stress moment in your day. And so being able to have those things, and it impacts mental clarity. Well, we get confused, right? I often tell the story about, the bedroom that has the desk with the pile of bills and the workout equipment and the bed. And you walk in and you go, wow, is it time to pay bills? Is it time to sleep? Or is it time to work out? Right? And already stress. And it's a bedroom. Bedroom is optimally designed for a deep restorative night's rest, right? And yet here, the bedroom is now something so not that. And so kind of like, okay, maybe you can't move the workout equipment, but can you put a beautiful cloth over it when you're not using it? Can you relocate the bills to a different space in the house, right? Can you finally clear out the junk room so then maybe the desk with the bills could go where the junk room had been? There's really beautiful stories of the transformations that take place when people clear. And I have so many, but one I think to share in this moment is the woman whose husband had died, and she knew, and he had his office, right? And she wanted to paint so badly. She wanted to be an artist. She had always wanted to be an artist, right? And she knew that room could be her studio for her artwork. And she just decided bravely to take those micro steps, right? To, first open the door, close the door, walk away. And the next day, open the door, step in, smell all the smells. Well, in that gentle micro movements and those tinier than baby steps in many ways, right? By the way, 5 minutes a day of having that clutter is better than doing nothing, right? So, and it gets incremental. So you don't have to do this big whoosh thing. Some people can, but most people can't. So be gentle with yourself. But in those gentle steps, a year later, she sold her first art piece. And you just love that, right? Because it's just like, oh God, this whole other part of her got to emerge in the wake of her losing her husband. And in that grief and loss, the painter in her emerged. And she created, in letting go of all those things in his office, she then created a space and claimed the space as a creative expression in her life. So that's the opportunity. It's like you want to hold that vision of what your life looked like 5 years from now. Another story, oh my gosh, Jen, another story that I'll quickly share, because I'm sure will have thoughts about each of these, but I had a woman come up to me and she said, I spent a year clearing out my dad's house after he died. And this Christmas, I gave gift certificates to experiences to every member of my family. I had no wrapped gifts under the tree because I got that I can never get that time back. I can never, and this was a personal thing. It's not like I'm advocating this. I'm just sharing this person's story. And I was so moved by her courage in sharing this because she got it. She got that, oh my gosh, I don't want my kids spending a year of their life clearing out my physical belongings when they could be being with their friends, engaged with their careers or their hobbies or their activities. So what's the, kind of like, what's the legacy that we're leaving behind if we're just focused on this accumulation? But she really got it, and like I said earlier, often it's fear based, kind of in your example of holding on, and it's a not trusting that something will flow in if I let go. What needs to flow in flows in, and so I can have soft hands, right, and let what needs to flow out, right. So
I think it's super important to realize that your stress will get less, your happiness will get more, and it will spill over, because we didn't really talk about that much, which is totally fine. It'll spill over into every area of your life, because once you reduce the stress in your home with your belongings and increase your joy, it's a layer thing. You don't realize how much your email is stressing you out, or social media is stressing you out, or whatever.
Right.
And that gift of time. I mean, when we went through minimalism, we started in a February, it'll be 7 years. And that December, we had 12 kids at home, and they asked for no presents and to go on a trip together. And I think in just by being an example, we weren't forcing minimalism on the kids, but by being that example, they realized that it was the time together that meant, because like what bunch of teenagers wants to like go hang out on a trip with their parents? But our kids did. And it was a great reminder for us, an example that the true excitement and memories come from the time that you spend and not the things that you get. And so that's been huge for us ever since. So in closing, you said to do things slowly. Most people need to do things slowly, which I totally agree with. So other than doing things slowly, what's the biggest piece of advice would you give someone? Because the Feng Shui is kind of tied into the minimalism. You can't have that space that you want if it's overflowing. So that your websites definitely talk to each other. So what advice would you give somebody other than go slow that's kind of starting out and wants to make these changes?
I'd say, what's the life that you want to live without the clutter? What are the experiences that you'd love to have? What's on your bucket list? that you want to go do. You're likely not going to remember the thing that you got for your birthday in 3rd grade, but you're certainly going to remember an experience, right? Yeah. And I think it's to your point, and asking that deeper question of what difference this will make in the level of happiness that you have. And there's research now that actually says experiences produce more happiness than a thing ever will, than a belonging ever will. So I'm thrilled to know that your children joined you for that vacation, and they like literally consciously chose that and had a great time, because they'll remember it. I promise you, they will remember it. They may not remember a gift that they got when they were 10 years old, but they'll remember that trip.
Yep. And the trips after, and the change in your focus. I love that. You'll start to realize that your focus will change on what you value.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, my joy. And thank you for having me on, and for this rich and multi-layered conversation, Jen. It was a joy to be here.
Thank you for investing your time with me on At a Crossroads with a Naked Podcaster. I'm so glad that you joined in the conversation. It would be amazing if you would share this episode with someone you think can benefit from it. All guests' links and audience freebies are available on the podcast page of momof18.com. This podcast was designed to help you in your struggles, so reach out and let me know what you enjoy and what you would like to see more of. It will support me on the journey to causing a worldwide epidemic of healing, gratitude, and joy. Until next time, remember, you're not alone in your struggle. Reach out to me on any platform. I love to connect. You are worth it to me.